Welcome back to Tide Pod, giving you two episodes in quick succession because there's just so much news to dive into, both on the team side and on the recruiting trail. Tony was talking yesterday kind of about all the changes running through, the coaching stuff, Alabama's current roster. We got Brandon here. We're going to dive into some recruiting. And Brandon, the headline, of this was kind of written for us here this morning, with Julian Sayin announcing he's going to enter the transfer portal. What were your kind of initial reactions to that? And just, thoughts? Were you surprised to see him kind of opt to test the transfer waters? Obviously, it's an interesting time when a guy like Saban retires and how recruits have been reacting. I know you've been following that, but with this news coming down the pipeline this morning, what were your thoughts on all that?
I definitely think it's, in some regards, a surprise to many Alabama fans. At the same side of it, you look at Austin Mack, who transfers in yesterday, and part of my thought process is like, well, what does Sayin think about that? And not from really a competition standpoint. That's not to say Austin Mack can't compete with him, but it's just, whenever they're bringing in a basically true freshman a year ahead of Julian, and Julian's a freshman with, what's expected. It was kind of expected for him to be the guy potentially next year, but, obviously things played out with Milroe to not be the case, but, to be the guy and have a guy come in a year ahead of him, maybe it was some reading the tea leaves that needed to be done, but, definitely understand the decision, especially with as much change that's taken place in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, I was curious about that. Like, I saw the take today that it was like maybe, Austin Mack, and you can give me your thoughts on him as well as a quarterback and looking into him. But like, I saw the take that, maybe Austin Mack came in because, DeBoer and company maybe learned in advance that Sayin might have been going, not necessarily the other way around. What do you think of that? Or do you think it was more of a reaction by Sayin, or was, he kind of, maybe do you get the vibe that he might have been thinking about entering, and then Mac was kind of brought in because it's like, well, we lose a guy like Sayin, we can bring a guy in to keep the depth in that QB room.
I think we go with the first one, that Julian, he's business, like he's a pro. He's very professional in that regard. And so, I think he went in with the expectation, told the staff, hey, this is what I'm going to do, X, Y, and Z. And it gave Alabama time to make the move that they eventually made.
Yeah. So Austin Mack comes in, like you said, he was a freshman last year, technically didn't play for Washington, but was at DeBoer's, or was under DeBoer's tutelage, so to speak. He was a number 17 quarterback in the 2023 class. And, now you're looking at a QB room, unless I missed any names, with Milroe, Ty Simpson, Dylan Lonergan still there, and now Austin Mack. What do you think of that? Obviously, in the long term, we know, Milroe seemingly is the guy again going into 2024, but long term, what do you think of Mack, and perhaps who could be the guy once Milroe departs, with Lonergan and Simpson still there too?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you factor in the Ty Simpson's still there, Lonergan's still there, there's definitely still options, right? At the end of the day, not all hope is lost. Whenever Nick Saban was putting together the 2023 class, he was able to pick up two quarterbacks, Eli Holstein and, obviously Dylan. And so just kind of preparing in advance for change that could happen, and that's why you do take two quarterbacks in classes, and that's why you're continuously recruiting. So, definitely you don't want to lose a Julian Sayin by any means, and you definitely want to keep as much stability on the roster as possible. But we all had to expect change, and change is just something that we have to expect.
So yeah, plenty of little bit of moving and shaking, I guess, with the quarterback room. But Brandon, when you look at it, obviously Sayin's, opting to try and take his talents elsewhere. But when you look at this quarterback room, I mean, you mentioned like Simpson and Lonergan. I've heard kind of hype about both guys. Both still pretty young. There was some reports that Lonergan was really good at fall camp and performing well last year. Simpson, I think a lot of people were very happy to see that he had opted to come back. Having covered them as as recruits, like, what do you see in both of them? And then, again, I guess reassuring, it seems like Alabama, can be pretty secure, at least in comfortability at the quarterback position with those two still in the fold.
Yeah, at this point, retention of Jalen Milroe is kind of at the forefront, right? Just because he has experience playing in the SEC and has, experience with his team, and just a lot of the leadership that's deciding to stick around. But then the next two up, with Ty Simpson and Dylan Lonergan. Dylan Lonergan was definitely a player that, was 5-star caliber in and out. But, was very focused on baseball as well. And so that's something that, people just take into account, like, was he going to be more of a baseball guy or a football guy? But he had the talents at football to kind of do anything he wanted to. Ty definitely established enough so where, Coach Saban put him in the game last year. And unfortunately, the circumstances were just, it was somewhat insane when you factor in the weather and, just everything that happened that day and, offensive production. So, overall, I think, there'll be competition at the position, and then you throw in Austin Mack, that's a quality quarterback room, whether, people want to believe it or not. Unproven, but still quality as far as talent is concerned. And, even with the remaining pieces that Alabama still has on the roster, it still gives a reason to be, excited. We just have to, if you're an Alabama fan, you have to get through this season. And not this season, but this season.
Yeah, this off season. Tony, we were talking, kind of put it best. It's like this is kind of the time to dunk on Alabama when they're not really able to go after as many transfers as they like, and then they'll have that spring window. They're gonna hit that hard for sure to get reloaded, at least in the immediate future. It's a good segue, and I know even amongst us staff members at Tide Illustrated, we're kind of speculating privately, like when it comes to Sayin being out the door now. I know I've asked you a million times, and I'm gonna do it again. I'm sorry. Where does this does Sayin, opting to go to the transfer portal, does that put a dent in Alabama's attempts to try and secure the commitment of Ryan Williams?
In neither of my conversations with either one of them have I ever really heard either one mention, one or, I've never heard, I've never heard Sayin mention Williams mention Sayin, but, I'm sure that in the back of your mind, you think about that, but Ryan's path to the field was a little bit quicker than Sayin's anyway, and so for him, it's kind of like, I'm just expecting to play immediately, and whoever's quarterback, I kind of understand that. I mean, because even if you factor in some of the teams that he's been noted around, in some respects, like Auburn isn't just like a surefire quarterback situation, versus Alabama. And then, even, Texas A&M, I mean, there's a little bit of question there, so, with Ryan Williams, I think it was a matter of just kind of the situation. I think it will continue to be situation and circumstances that, aren't above, are in rooms beyond our comprehension. I'll just say that.
Yeah, sure.
But Sayin, I think he'll just, do his own thing. And any of the dealings that I've had with him, very pro, like very, very pro in his approach, and definitely someone who is going to make a business decision.
Definitely. Ryan Williams doesn't care. I don't care who's throwing it to me. Just give me the ball. That's what it seems like it'll be going forward. So
he cares, but
he's
the Sayin thing may not be a factor.
Right. So, taking a look around some of these other 2024 guys, I know you've been talking, just getting basically a read on how some of these guys are feeling with DeBoer and even Ryan Grubb. And now we've had some more coaching hires. What have you been hearing? Who are some of the guys that seem like they're kind of still all in? Maybe some guys that are, questioning a little bit, still kind of, we'll have to wait and see. And, some guys that maybe are out and have been, not super excited about the fact they're not getting coached by Saban anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you ask any player who's in the commitment class and obviously on the roster, everybody's been affected by the fact that they're not getting coached by Saban anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
But some of them, just have some ties to the program. Some of them have just a connection that goes beyond. Sayin makes sense. New offensive scheme, great relationship with Coach Reese, strong development with Coach Saban. But then, I mean, you think about other things, and it's like, well, Jalen Mbakwe, Alabama kid through and through, has strong connections to Alabama. He'd be an in-state kid no matter where he went in some respects. Xavier Brown and Peyton Woodyard, they're there together. And there already are some California ties as well with this staff kind of recruiting that area. But then just those two, they kind of made the decision simultaneously. You saw how they were together at the All-American Bowl. You factor those things in. You say, do they really want to break up what they've already built, and they're at Alabama, and they can create that. You just factor that in. Caleb Odom, playing time is seamlessly hit him in the face.
Mm-hmm.
He'll have opportunity to contribute right away. So does Caleb Odom want to leave? When you factor in a Jameer Grimsley, on the other hand, Florida was always a team that kind of pushed hard for him. In some respects, they almost made him delay his decision for National Signing Day. And so you factor that in. It's like, well, you can see there being some pushback with that. But Jeremiah Beeman, another player, in-state guy. But some of those late decisions, whether Xavier Mincy, Daniel Hill, who still has strong Alabama roots, Jay Sean Ross, those type of kids, where maybe their sole connection was just them making the decision. They could be more impacted than, say, Sterling Dixon or Darius Morgan or William Sanders, who have other guys they're familiar with on the roster. The playing time is in some respects going to be there quicker probably than they expected, and even like Aaron Hampton. Aaron Hampton has Jaden Hale on the team. Do you break that up if you came together and you kind of just stick it out and you make it work? So at least initially. And speaking, he just recently we got interrupted during the podcast by Amari Jefferson, just checking in on the situation, just trying to figure out what is going on. And he's not on campus yet, but you can just kind of feel the impacts of the changes in the class and how it's affecting current recruits, and obviously we'll see how it affects other guys moving forward.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of really good points. It's it's kind of just a case by case basis with some of these guys, whether they have relationships on the team, like you said, in-state ties, all of that stuff can kind of play a factor. Um, I would guess, especially you can do kind of a way too early look if you like, but you mentioned that National Signing Day coming up. I believe it's February 7th. So next month here, what name should Alabama should have their eye on? In addition to / other than Ryan Williams. I know that's always going to be a hot button situation until he puts pen to paper. But what are some of those guys? Whether it's some that you mentioned who haven't signed on the dotted line yet, or just some guys the Crimson Tide still has their eye on. Maybe new guys now that DeBoer's there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Ryan Williams will be the focus, right? He's supposed to be on campus this weekend. He actually got some time on campus earlier this week, and coincidentally, there was a snow day where it kind of had most Alabama residents stuck at home, or in his case, stuck in Tuscaloosa. That's the hope for many Alabama fans out there, right? Is that he did get stuck in Tuscaloosa, and maybe the staff passed by and had a couple words, with Jalen Mbakwe, apparantly as
Brought him some hot cocoa. Just checked in on him.
yeah, and had the recruiting pitch and the NIL. But you factor those things in, and you say Ryan Williams has to be the number one topic. I looked at his Instagram the other day, and he was at like nearly 90,000 followers on Instagram. I was like, well, you've done well with this process, young man. You've done well. But he's definitely one. And then Noah Carter, Arizona kid, 3-star prospect, was committed to Washington. Actually, was signed a letter of intent, but decided to get out of that earlier this week. Is supposed to be on campus this weekend to visit Alabama. I actually have an interview from him coming up later. But definitely a priority target for Alabama late in this 2024 class, where it looks like they seem to have fireworks every stretch of the way, and they will have some fireworks late for this February stretch, and even potentially this weekend.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's funny when you look at Noah Carter's timeline. I mean, it's January 13th decommitment from Washington, January 16th offer from Alabama, just like that. So he seems like a guy. I was gonna ask you about him, and you already brought him up, like that DeBoer, definitely wanted and maybe still wants and thinks they can compete with the Crimson Tide members. But yeah, what else you got for a signing
Well,
day? I cut you
I'll
off.
just say, signing day's still a little bit of ways
Mhm.
as far as 24 is concerned. We have to see a couple more names pop up. It's kind of hard to carve that out at this point in time just because of the number of guys that came off the board in December. I mean, a lot of them would have to be asking for their national letter of intent to essentially be ripped up so they could, enter back in, and then it would kind of make things, in
Right.
some regards, obvious. And as we were talking, I get a text from a Bama coach. But at the end of the day, when you look at all the factors that are involved, one thing that we've definitely noticed is that the staff has been very focused on recruiting the West Coast. I mean, a good majority of the offers that they first put out were very West Coast heavy. They made sure to they continue to just focus on some of the guys out there and working to bring some of those relationships over. I've heard some feedback from the Alabama guys. It's been more so just trying to get familiar with Alabama, the new Alabama staff. But only time will tell. Where Alabama's focus is. Over the years, it's been a national brand. I would expect the Southeast to still be a priority. But that's up to the new staff and kind of what they're looking to do.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you bring that up because I think that's been like a worry of the fans. It's like with all the new coaching staff, it's like this guy, they don't have any experience in the South. They don't have any experience in the Southeast recruiting. Like, Sayin was a California tie. You mentioned all the other guys who, are kind of West Coast centric that have already come in the fold. So I mean, that still seems to be a kind of a hotbed area for Alabama too. But you're right. That doesn't detract from the fact that, you want to still win the battles in state, win the
10 to
battles in the
14
nearby
of
state.
players in the class came from Alabama. Ryan Williams, Alabama kid. Kevin
Yeah.
Coleman, Alabama kid. Perry Thompson's Alabama kid.
So
Sterling
you,
Dixon's.
so yeah, you still want that to be your priority. But I do think it's a good point to
Calvin
mention,
Henderson, Brian Grady.
But yeah, I mean, I just think it's interesting too. You look at that, they're kind of trying to keep that kind of West Coast pipeline open as well. But of course,
I'm definitely interested to see it. I mean, as a podcast, I'm interested to see like how things are going to play out because
yeah,
right now it's been very West Coast heavy. I've kind of heard some Alabama kids like talking. You really haven't seen any Georgia kids really pipe in too much about it.
mhm.
Like, you know, I really haven't heard too much from the Southeast, early on, even Florida. But California's been buzzing with blessed to receive an offer from Alabama. Now they did offer Micah DeBose, which was major, and he's had some mixed feelings about them kind of taking over because we've kind of seen this West Coast thing before, and we've seen it with Auburn, and that wasn't the best result. So just Washington was able to hang with the best last year, and there's a lot of factors that helped them get to that point. You just hope that in-state continues to be a focus.
Definitely. Yeah. We'll see how, DeBoer attacks that in terms of the future. Let's look a way ahead now because this has obviously even affected, the 2025 class. Guys like Zion Grady, Jamie French, who, you would hop on here, Brandon, and talk about how excited like French was to get on campus and committing so early and stuff like that. And now it's more stuff's up in the air. Is Alabama kind of hitting the reset button with the 2025 class? What's that kind of look like now in the wake of DeBoer kind of getting his feet under him as the new coach?
Even if they didn't hit the reset button, I mean, the players hit the reset button for
Yeah.
him and the staff. I think the only players left are Anthony Turbo Rogers and Miles Johnson in 2025, and then Zyke Hilton. And who's to say? Every time we do a podcast, it seems like something crazy seems to happen. So if I say they're committed, they'll stay committed. They'll then turn around and decommit. If I say they're going to decommit, then they'll turn around and reaffirm their commitments. But yeah, I mean, the classes have kind of taken themselves away, and for good reason. If you just make sense, Mason Short was already kind of set to visit Georgia and was at least going to entertain them. Why stay committed to Alabama if that's the case? Jamie French was already taking visits and was probably firm to his commitment to Alabama just because of Saban, a good majority of that reason, and Wiggins. And then Wiggins leaves and Saban leaves. I understand you exploring your options. Zion Grady has a lot of pull from in-state as far as Auburn guys around him, his 7-on-7 team, etc. So you factor those things in. Auburn was already going to play a factor. Grady was just kind of doing his own thing, but I do expect Grady to kind of hear out the new staff if they're willing to build that relationship with them. But for like I mentioned even just a second ago, it seems like there's a lot of West Coast flavor, and we could see the Alabama team be more colorful than it has been in the past. Only time will tell. But that's what it sounds like, is that it just will be more colorful. There'll be a wider net of players, a more openness to players almost from everywhere, you could say. But we'll see how important, the Yellow Hammer State is, because it's very, very, very important.
Yeah, you can't really overstate that. I would agree, but it's interesting just to kind of see where their footprint might go with the first new coach in 16 years. So who knows? The other thing I saw, I know you wrote about, was the wide receiver Marcus Harris is getting set to take a visit in February. Is there anyone else they're looking to line up, if you're able to say? I know there's stuff. That's why you go subscribe to the site, because that's where Brandon will have all the information. But thoughts on Harris, and then what you're hearing in terms of maybe some potential other guys.
No, visits are still shaping up right now. I expect a junior day to start to formulate. Still some changes as far as roster retention, roster management, and then recruiting is kind of taking some of a back burn on that. Mm-hmm. But, as we know, first-year head coach in first cycle, he's kind of trying to reset things as far as just finalizing what the 2024 class is going to look like and who he's going to keep. And then recruiting will definitely amp up, and we'll be the talk of the town. And you'll hear nuggets and rumors and facts from us pretty consistently, because in the first year of a coach recruiting, in the first year recruiting class of a coach, typically it's one of their best classes just because of, the momentum and the message, etc. Right now he's having to go through some of that clutter and fight some battles internally as far as Bama bashing, for lack of better terms. But, to be able to surpass that and get some guys he's familiar with to get on board, and then get some guys he's unfamiliar with to buy into the message will do wonders. But, definitely that Southeast connection, we have to see that show up pretty quickly here.
Yeah. Yeah. He's, I don't envy DeBoer. He's got a lot of work ahead of him, a tall order. Yeah. Subscribe to Tide Illustrated. You can see all Brandon's work and all the recruiting coverage. Any final words, Brandon, with 2024, 2025? Anything I missed people should watch out for until inevitably it becomes, some other headline that grabs this, probably whenever this podcast goes up?
I mean, at the end of the day, if you consider Rowan to be following, losing all the members of both classes, 25 and 26, then I guess you consider Rowan to be following. You have to understand it's a new coach, and there's going to be changes, and it just comes with a West Coast feel, and being someone who had to transition to Alabama myself, there's definitely a transition, right? And the kids have to get familiar with you as well. So he's going to get some guys that he wants. His recruiting tactics are a little bit different. And his success at recruiting is a little bit different, especially coming from Washington and Sioux Falls. But ultimately, at Alabama, he's going to have to recruit. You're going to have to recruit with the best of them. And, that's the expectation. So that is my expectation. And I look forward to covering some good recruiting. And from a West Coast, at least feel, there's already some buzz. So, as it starts to trickle this way, hopefully that buzz continues and more guys that we know and love and cover very closely start to talk highly about the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Plenty to be excited about, in addition to, nervous about, I guess, for Alabama fans. It's a lot, and we'll have it all for you. We'll have another episode next week, stuff coming out. There will definitely be more stories to talk about. So we'll dive into that. Go subscribe to the site, subscribe to the YouTube if you're watching on there. And with that, everyone take care. We'll see you all next week.